Alright, picture this. Midnight premieres, people in capes, grown adults sobbing over space wizards, entire cities turning into costume parties because a logo hit the screen. Well, which logo, you ask? Well, on one side you have the MCU, a conveyor belt of superheroes punching the box office into submission for over a decade. And on the other side you have Star Wars, a franchise so powerful it basically prints money while fans argue about lightsaber colors like it's religion. This was not just entertainment, this was cultural domination. And the question everyone thinks they already know the answer to is simple. Which empire actually dominated the dollar? Because here's what everyone remembers. Marvel dropped movie after movie, smashed records, built toward Endgame like it was the Super Bowl of cinema. And it was. Star Wars came back from the dead. Force Awakens exploded and nostalgia went nuclear. The headlines screamed billions. Fans flexed box office numbers like Chris Hemsworth gearing up for another Thor movie. Marvel fans said, "Excelsior, we win!" And Star Wars fans said, "No, no, I am your father." But the box office totals don't tell the whole story. They never do. And right now, we're going to dig into some of these numbers like a Jawa sifting through scraps. Now, let's start with what people think happened. Marvel Studios turned the MCU into the most successful film franchise in history. Over 30 films. Total global box office north of $30 billion. Endgame alone pulls in almost $3 billion worldwide. And people see that number and assume Marvel backed a truck up to Kevin Feige's house and just poured money on his lawn. Star Wars looked smaller by comparison if you only count the modern era films, like The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker, Rogue One, Solo. These all roughly pulled in $6 billion total. And add in the entire movie franchise, not adjusted for inflation, and you're looking at around $10 billion. Fans shrug and say, Marvel wins, case closed. Except that is the surface level take, because box office is not profit, it's gross. And gross is where studios love to distract you while the real money quietly moves around behind the scenes. Now, the first problem is budgets. Marvel movies are expensive, like absurdly expensive. The average MCU film costs up to $250 million just to make. Endgame was rumored north of $300 million before marketing even entered the chat. Then comes marketing. Global campaigns, major sporting event ads, billboards everywhere. That marketing spend can quietly match the production budget, sometimes even exceed it. So when Endgame makes $2.8 billion, Disney does not see $2.8 billion. Theaters take their cut, roughly half domestically, a bigger chunk internationally. China especially takes a massive bite. Suddenly, that headline number starts shrinking fast. And now how about Star Wars? Here's where things get interesting. Star Wars films are also expensive, but the brand does something Marvel cannot fully replicate. It markets itself. The logo alone does the marketing. The fan base does half the work for free. That does not mean marketing is cheap, but the efficiency is insane. Force Awakens had a reported budget of around $300 million, including reshoots and other chaos. Marketing was huge, but the nostalgia engine did a lot of the heavy lifting. And the theaters? Well, same deal, same cuts, same math. So, if both franchises bleed money through budgets and splits, where does the real difference come from? Well, say it with me. Merchandise. Now, Marvel sells merch. Tons of it, actually. Action figures, shirts, lunchboxes. But the Marvel characters are fragmented. Spider-Man merch rights are complicated. The Hulk is weird. Deals are split. Royalties go everywhere. Marvel is powerful, but not always clean. Star Wars is different. Star Wars is a merchandise monster. Lightsabers, droids, Lego sets, costumes, bed sheets, toothbrushes. Entire toy aisles have lived and died by Star Wars. And you know what? George Lucas was not stupid about this. When Lucas made the original deal back in the day, he kept the merchandising rights, and everyone laughed at him. Studios thought toys were a joke. That decision turned him into a billionaire. When Disney bought Lucasfilm for about $4 billion, they were not buying just movies, they were buying a merch empire as well. That means every time a kid swings a plastic lightsaber, money flows in a way Marvel can only dream about. Even when a Star Wars movie underperforms, the merch machine keeps humming. And another hidden factor? Creative payouts. Marvel is notorious for keeping actor salaries low early on. Robert Downey Jr. is the famous exception, not the rule. Most Marvel actors sign long contracts before they are household names, and by the time they renegotiate, Disney has leverage. Downey was the exception because he was the gamble that started the whole thing. After Iron Man proved Marvel could work, his leverage went nuclear. By the time Infinity War and Endgame rolled around, Marvel was not negotiating with an actor, they were negotiating with the face of the franchise. But the machine is bigger than any one hero. That keeps costs controlled, but also means fewer individuals walk away absurdly rich from back-end deals. The Star Wars actors? Well, a little bit of a different story, but the real money is not with the actors. Daisy Ridley did not get Downey money. John Boyega did not get Downey money. The real power stayed with the studio. So let's stop dancing around and actually put some numbers on the table. Because if you strip away the hype and do the ugly math, Marvel's entire theatrical run likely generated somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 to $8 billion in real profit after budgets, marketing, and theater cuts. And that is insane money. That is historic money. That is a studio run that will never be replicated. But Star Wars plays a different game. The modern era Star Wars films alone probably cleared $2 to $3 billion in profit, which sounds smaller until you remember that box office was never the point. Say it with me again. Merchandise. Since 1977, merchandise has generated over $40 billion globally. Even after manufacturing, licensing split, and retail cuts, Star Wars merchandise has conservatively thrown off $10 to $15 billion in profit over its lifetime. And then there are the theme parks. Galaxy's Edge is not just a land, it's a financial black hole that sucks wallets dry. Tickets, hotels, food, lightsabers. A week there costs more than 6 months' mortgage. Analysts estimate that Star Wars-themed attractions and experiences add hundreds of millions per year to Disney's bottom line, quietly, reliably, and forever. Which brings us to our first winner, George Lucas. Lucas sells Lucasfilm to Disney for just over $4 billion, mostly tax-efficient stock, walks away clean, no sequel drama, no fandom rage, no creative burnout. Add decades of merchandise royalties before the sale, and Lucas personally clears well north of $5 billion in his lifetime from Star Wars. Marvel never created that moment for a single human being. But now here comes the twist, because that is not actually the end of the story, because the real winner is not Marvel, it's not Star Wars, and it's not even George Lucas. It's the mouse. Disney buys Marvel for about $4 billion and turns it into a profit machine that pays for itself multiple times over. Then Disney buys Star Wars for about $4 billion and absorbs the most powerful merchandising brand in entertainment history. Then Disney rolls both of them into streaming, parks, licensing, cruises, toys, and cross-platform dominance. Marvel feeds theaters, Star Wars feeds, well, everything else. Together, they form an ecosystem where Disney does not need hits. It has ownership. And that is the part nobody likes to admit. Disney does not care which fandom wins, it only cares that you argue about it while handing over money in whichever way you do. So yes, Star Wars wins the battle, it always did, with merchandise, mythology, and longevity. But Disney wins the war because the studio that owns galaxies near and far does not need to choose a side, it collects from both. The final moral: box office makes legends. Merchandise makes dynasties, but ownership makes empires. Next week, we'll look at the faces in front of the screen that walked away with the highest upfront payday. Not back-end deals, not sequel anticipation, just the fattest checks written for a single project, and who got to cash them. Now, like this video and subscribe to the damn channel, or I'll have Chewbacca come over and pull your arms out of your sockets.